Hello, welcome to another Rocks 3D Studio tutorial. This is part 3 of the Chalkboard modeling short series that I'm finally getting around to finishing this third part for. Here we will take the UV unwrapped chalkboard model that we did in part 2 and create a wood texture for it along with the slate black background. We'll create a simple cycles material. It's good for a base material if you're using image textures or even if you're not. And that's about the gist of it. So it's going to be about 30 minutes or so, and I hope you like it. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do is use GIMP, or you can use Photoshop to create the material for the chalkboard. In the last two tutorials we were running the Blender internal render engine. I just find it easier when I'm modeling and not really worrying about the materials or the rendering, and I can just and also with the unwrapping, so I can quickly and easily just click texture mode and see the stretching on my unwrap. But for this we are going to switch to the cycles render since we don't really need this grid anymore. So in my case, I have went to user preferences. Under the system tab, there's a compute device. If you hit none, it's just going to use your CPU. If you have a graphics card, check CUDA, and it'll use the cores in the it'll use the graphic processor. And over here you see in the render tab, you see CPU, GPU compute. I'm going to switch it to GPU. It's quicker. So if I hit rendered, you can see it does 10 samples fairly quick, and there's no lighting, so that's what you get right now. So, and I don't have ambient occlusion on at all. So if we turned it on, you can see we have a little bit of a environment lighting, but I can actually just go ahead and crank that down a bit. We're not going to need this for a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and go back to our solid view. First, what we can do, 7 on your number pad, go in the top view. I'm going to go ahead and add a lamp, sun lamp, to the scene. And I'm just going to go ahead and position, whoops, bring it up, and I'm rotating around the center center bit, so I'm going to switch that to median point. I'm just going to bring it up and give it a bit of an angle, put it behind the camera here. So when we hit the rendered, we have a little more light in our scene, and you can kind of see the shadows and the edges better. So back to solid view here, and let's actually change this to why can't I find it? The node editor. We can close this down a little bit here. And zoom in. So what we see here is if we select what we had the lamp selected, and that automatically has your, if you go to lamp settings, it's an emission shader. You can control the strength here, and that'll control the strength of the scene. So crank it up, whatnot, you can see the difference. Let's go ahead and leave that in, I'm going to put up to 5. So when we start previewing our textures, we'll see a little bit better. If you select the chalkboard, you see there's nothing here. It's because we don't have a material. We can start, just hit new material, and it automatically throws a diffuse shader on here. You can also, pick all of these different types of shaders. You can also do it here in the window, Shift A, You can bring your shaders. Every other node that you're going to need is just with Shift A, and it'll bring that up. Right now we'll just leave this diffuse as white, because what we're going to do before we go into GIMP to create the image texture, we might as well just go ahead and set up our material for this, because then we can just plug in the image as we're testing it. So Shift A, texture, in image texture, and just plug these color, just left click and drag from the node, and you can connect the color. You can see here, excuse me, it's pink because we have no image, but we will. So, and what we're also going to do here is Shift A, go to shader and glossy. Now this is to create, say, metal or like just any reflective surface. Move this over here. The chalkboard's not going to be that, there's not going to be any much of a reflective surface on it. So we're just going to create a simple diffuse and a global reflectiveness, I guess, to it. It's going to be really low though. So what we need to do is mix the diffuse and the glossy to output here to the surface material. So Shift A, I'm going to go color. Nope, we want to go to, why can't I find it? I haven't done this in a while. Duh, we need a mix shader. So just drop that right in there, and then we can pull this up into the second slot. And this factor node, the mix is, now in this case, it's going to be 50% diffuse and 50% glossy. If I like rendered this, you can see the reflective surface here. If I crank it up, it's fully reflective. Bring it down, it's just fully diffuse. So for this, I mean, we don't need a whole lot, but even for, as you can see here on like these knobs, these are going to be like a plasticky material. If you just crank this up just a little bit, you're going to have just a little bit. I think I'm going to put this at 0.04. And we'll just leave it there for the time being, because you can't really tell until we get this image texture on here. So we can actually leave this as it is. This is our material so far until we plug the texture in, and then this pink will go away. So what I want to do is bring in the template that we created last time and this wood texture. Just hit rotate, it'll keep it the same. I want to right click on this layer and add an alpha channel. So what we need to do is scale this down because the grain is just too big. So go ahead and I'm going to hold control to constrain to keep the proportions. And I'm going to eyeball it. So it's 1500 something by 850-ish. Try that. Bring that up and we'll zoom in here. And I'll move this layer down. And I'm going to hide this template. And as you can see, this image is a little uneven. Kind of bring it in a little bit. Dark on one side, kind of washed out here on the edge, and then brighter in the center. If we go up to the filters and make seamless, it sometimes, in this case I think that worked okay. It reduced the dark on the left, kind of evened out the whole image. It doesn't always work, but it's a good place to start. Or you could use the clone brush and paint your way to making it even. But in this case, since the wood joints, you know, if we had like super dark here on the top and then really light on this edge, it would just clash. So we want to kind of even out that wood color. So with that layer selected, I'm going to move it up and put it about there. Then I'm going to select the lasso tool. So now I'll go ahead and cut this out on this angle here, and I'm just going to do this top piece. You necessarily don't have to really draw in between the line, because you can be sloppy about this backboard, because we're going to cover over it anyway. I'm just trying to match these angles as close as possible. Then we can actually add to the selection, so select this little guy here, and then do the same for the bottom. Pull that angle in. A little bit tedious, but so now we have those. I'm going to hit Control I, and then first I am going to duplicate this layer, hide it for the moment, and then I'm going to, after you hit Control I, go ahead and hit Delete. Shift Control A will get rid of the mask, and as you see now we have, turn this off, and you can see that we have the grain going in that direction on the top and bottom. So we can actually make this visible, the duplicated layer you made, and bring this down. And that actually covers that up pretty good. See if I can zoom in. There we go. Little better view there, and in this case we need to actually make a little more fancy cuts here, so I'm gonna kind of go in this way. Because this little flap that I'm cutting around right now is the inner edge of this main board here. So that looks good, and we still have this add selection, so we can go down and do this one down here, and try to get it close. I mean, you can always paint in anything you miss. I mean, because it's gonna be so minute if you do. Try to get in here because I'm gonna do a different part for this the chalk tray. So Control I should have duplicated this, so I'm going to duplicate this layer. So Control I and then delete. Control Shift A will get rid of the mask. I'm going to select that duplicated layer we just made, move that out of the way, and you can see now we have the top and bottom there, and I can just actually draw a box around the chalk tray. Duplicate before I delete anything. I don't know why I don't know why this button isn't working, but anyway, we can duplicate there. Select this one and then Control I and delete. Select that layer that you just created, and we'll move it over to the side, and you can see now we have our chalk tray, and I'm gonna get rid of that selection, this selection mask we had. So move this back up here. Now these up top here is like one of the supports. This is one of the supports, and so are these. Or that might be the foot. Actually, that's the foot of the chalkboard. This is the upright. These are supports, and this is one of the main supports. So in this case, these two, this long piece, and this here can all have a vertical texture or the vertical grains as this side piece will. But we have this piece and this piece down here to create. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this up here. I'll duplicate this layer. So select one of these and then draw the box mask around it. And Control I and delete, and Control Shift A to get rid of the mask, and then select that copy you made and drag her down here. I'm going to scroll up for a sec so that looks okay, and do the same down here. We're going to box select, but first go ahead and duplicate this layer, because then this is the one we're going to rotate to get the vertical grains. So here we go with this one. Just going to go ahead and do a box select, Control I, and delete. Then we'll get rid of the selection. So now I'm going to zoom out, kind of reorient myself here. Take this layer, just bring it up here so we can see it, and I'm going to rotate, 90 degrees. And we can almost, let me see, I'm going to actually scale this out just a little bit to cover the entire length. And we'll go ahead and duplicate this now. So duplicate, and then, oh, it didn't duplicate. Duplicate, there we go. And then move this one over. Actually, kind of kill two birds there by, I can do these two verticals and all this here. I don't want to stretch it out too far because it might start looking odd. So, but you can always test it. So let's do that and see if we can get away with it. I don't think that looks any different, so there we go. Made it a little bit easier on ourselves. So I'm going to do this lasso tool again. I'm going to select my layer over here, and with the add selection, I'm going to go ahead and do these cuts here. This can make you go cross-eyed after a little bit. I could zoom in a lot farther, but just kind of doing a quick and dirty. Mask here, so we're not wasting too much time. And usually keeping the, I can see I screwed it up there, but that's alright. So go ahead and Control I here, and we will delete all of that. I'm going to get rid of this mask, and you can see I have a little gap at the top here. Let's zoom in. And I can paint this in pretty easy. I'm going to make sure I have that selected, that layer. Hit the clone brush. Just pick an area, Control, and then click to pick a sample area, and then you can brush your texture in there. So that looks okay there. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to control click to sample here so I don't get this little guy, and then we can kind of brush that in. You can see it got a little dark mark there, but I think that should be okay. And the bottom, yeah, same thing. I'm going to control click and then kind of paint that in. And wow, I'm really off down here. Let's do control click there and paint that in, and then as you can see, the sample mark moves along with the brush. So if you were to go outside of this texture, it'd end up painting black. So let's go ahead and zoom out, and that looks good on that side, and the other side here is going to be fairly quick. I don't want to be moving that. I want to select this layer and then make sure I have enough coverage. Looks good. So I can actually, yeah, I'll have to actually do a lasso. I was going to try to do a box on it, and then that's not going to work. So I can just go outside here and then come down here and should zoom in, but I'm just gonna mark my way around this. You could be a little sloppier here because you're going to paint these knobs black anyway. So that takes care of all these vertical bits. So Control I and then delete. And you notice I didn't duplicate this layer again because we don't need any more wood bits. So I can create a new layer. Oops. I'll do this because the buttons aren't working. So that's a layer. I'm going to use that to paint these knobs in. I don't have my tablet plugged in at the moment, so I'm going to be using the mouse. This I'm just going to do not straight black. I'll just do a dark gray. And then on this new layer, just go ahead and paint in. I could just draw a mask around it as well and use the fill tool. But let's practice my mouse painting skills here. Alright, so there's that. I'm going to hide the template. Sometimes you can't see where you missed paint. So let's take that and kind of want to do a little bit of a texture over it. So I'm going to just make a little lighter gray here. Kind of 50-50. I think that looks good. It's a little bit of a variation there. I'm not going to really be rendering that close anyway. Oh, and you know what I didn't do? Look at that. I don't have the edge of the chalkboard, so I'm going to duplicate this layer and see if we have enough. Oh, hey, the button worked now. Great. We have enough. We do. So let me go ahead and do this real quick. Never fails. Think you've gotten so far, and then it's kind of good to see the process though without any real editing. Of course, I don't want to waste your time, but you get to see the process with all of its hiccups and fits and starts and whatnot. So let's Control I, and I'm going to delete, and then we'll get rid of the mask. Looks like everything's good. Oops, kind of missed a little bit there, so let's go ahead and do our clone. And I don't want this goofy brush, and I don't want it that big. Don't want it that big either. Let's go down. There we go. So I'm going to actually paint with that color. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to paint on this. Woo, that's a little stark. So that looks like it's covered good, and that isn't. So I'm going to pick this current layer that we're working on and paint that away, so it'll be good there. And then one last thing we want to do is go ahead and do the chalkboards. So I'm going to go ahead and do there, and let's create a new layer. For the board background, I'm going to mask off the shapes here. And I don't have the add selection for the box tool. Here we go. So that's good, and with this new layer selected, let's pick a dark gray. I don't want it to be too black. So do that, and then go ahead and fill that in. So let's remove this layer. As you can see, that kind of adds to the color. So I like that. So we'll go ahead and leave. I'm going to leave the masks on, and I'm going to create a new layer for the chalk look. So I'm going to pick a color now. Just do a light gray, not quite white. And pick my brush and there we go. We use that. I'm going to make it kind of big though. So let's go ahead and paint this on. I'm going to smudge it up a bit. That's a little bit better. Can actually maybe duplicate this and see. Turn the opacity so that way I can kind of control how. I'll do that. Try an overlay. I don't know what is up with these icons. Nothing's working. Just take that down to there. And then I'm going to remove the selections. And it looks like everything is textured here. I'm going to actually copy over this since I've already already saved it before. Then we'll export. Name it Chalkboard Diffuse. That's what I used, and that's the previous one I had, but since a bunch of software nonsense didn't record right, and I had to redo this. So let's see what this looks like. So what we want to do, we're still in this rendered mode here. I want to open the Chalkboard Diffuse into this image texture node here, and voila, we have our textured chalkboard. Now we could lighten up the wood. That doesn't necessarily look like the wood I remember. It was a little lighter, but I think this turned out really well. So we learned how to create cycles material, very simple. Base material, add an image texture, creating the image texture in GIMP. Here's the completed model. I hope this proved useful to you. Feel free to add some comments in the area below. Give me suggestions for other tutorials perhaps, because I'm kind of lazy about coming up with ideas. And subscribe to my channel to keep abreast of any new tutorials that I upload, which I'm going to try to do every Friday for you. So until next time, I'll see you later.